Todd Sheldon here with CFI Pro, and I'm going to tell you, I'm probably just as excited as I can be today because this is literally the last video that we're going to have on the regulations. And what a trip this has been. I'm telling you, you guys have been absolutely great hanging in there and watching these videos. I am telling you, I'm very proud of everybody who has come this far in regards to trying to move forward with memorizing these regulations, which I'm going to tell you, man, this is like pulling hair. This stuff is so hard to make interesting. But hopefully, I've done a good job at kind of keeping you here up until now. So you only have this video to go and you'll be finished. So without further ado, let's get started. Just to review, we're on Title 14, Chapter 1, Subchapter D, Part 61, and then the section is going to be like the .1, .2, .3, .4. And we're going to be down at the very bottom here. But this is very important, I think, because you really need to know. I think when you have someone talk and they're trying to be all like knowledgeable about what's going on in the regulations, and they'll say the FARs. And you really got to understand that there really is nothing called the FARs. So if you say the FARs, that's really not something that really exists. So what you actually have to say is Title 14 CFR, which is the more proper way to say it. That's the pro way of saying it. For people who say it the other way, I don't really take a lot of stock in that. So it's the Title 14 CFR Part 61 is what we're going to talk about. In regards to that, let's look at where we want to be. There, we've talked about Subpart A already. We've talked about Subpart B already. And we've talked about Subpart C, and Subpart D, and Subpart E, Subpart F. We're not going to talk about Subpart G because this is self-endorsed. We don't do that. But we're at the very last part here, Subpart H, Flight Instructors. And down here at the last two, because this is reserved. So 61.197, let's click on that and let's see where that's going to take us in regards to that. Make the screen really big there. And let's talk about the renewal requirements for the flight instructor. So here it is, your flight instructor certificate. We know that thing's good for 24 months, but don't wait till the 24th month to try to figure out how you're going to renew, because you're going to lose access to certain things like, well mainly IACRA. So if you are trying to do an IACRA application and your flight instructor certificate has not been renewed in the system, IACRA is not going to work for you. So you want to think about 3 months prior to actually renewing of how you're going to do this. If we're looking at where we are here, we're 61.197, a person who holds a flight instructor certificate that has not expired. Okay, so that would be 199. We're only in 197, which is renewal. Okay, so if it has not expired, they may renew that flight instructor certificate by passing a practical test for one of the ratings listed on the current flight instructor certificate. What in the world does that mean? Passing a practical test for one of the ratings listed on the current flight instructor certificate. Well, that means if you have an I and a double I and an MEI and a rotary I and a glider I and all the other I's, if you just did a renewal ride for just one of those, you wouldn't have to renew every one of them. You'd only have to renew one of them, and that would renew everything across the board. Or what you could also do is do an additional flight instructor rating. So if you're going to add something else, let's say you had your II, MEI for airplane, and then at the before 24 months hit, you're like, then I really like gliders and I really want to get my glider instructor. No problem. You could do that. And guess what? It would reset all of your other flight instructor certificates, which is really cool, I think. Now, one of the other things that you can do is you can also submit a completed and signed application with the FAA and satisfactory completing one of the following renewal requirements. So do you remember how you complete and sign an application with the FAA? If you said IACRA, then you're 100% correct. So what can we do through IACRA to help us with that? Well, the first one is we can submit a completed and signed application with the FAA because we have a record of training students showing that during the preceding 24 calendar months of that application, the flight instructor has endorsed at least 5 students for a practical test for a certificate of rating, and at least 80% of those students have passed on the first attempt. This can actually be the same student. It says at least 5 students. It makes you think that it's 5 separate people, but it could be the same person. Say if you did someone's private and they passed, instrument and they passed, commercial and they passed, commercial single add-on and they passed, and then they did an additional class or something and they passed. That's 5. If they all passed if the person all passed all 5 of those on the first go, that would also be the same thing. But just remember, you have to count every one of your check rides that you've done within the preceding 24 months. Every single one. Count every single one you've done. If you have an 80% pass rate, this one's good for you. Within the preceding 3 calendar months, the person has successfully completed an approved flight instructor refresher course consisting of ground training or flight training, or a combination of both. So this is called a FERC, Flight Instructor Refresher Course, or we also call them clinics, consisting of ground or flight or a combination of both. So yeah, you can renew your CFI just by doing a FERC in the ground portion. Isn't that cool? You don't even have to go flying, but you could if you wanted to. The next one here says a record showing that within the preceding 24 months from the month of application, the flight instructor passed an official U.S. Armed Forces military instructor pilot or pilot examiner proficiency check in an aircraft for which the military instructor already holds a rating, or an aircraft for an additional rating. So basically, if a military flight instructor does a military proficiency check for that, boom, that is the same way there. And now we're going to click on here to paragraph B. So that was everything in paragraph A. And it says the expiration month of a renewed flight instructor certificate shall be 24 calendar months from the month the renewal requirements of paragraph A in the section are accomplished, or the month of expiration of the current flight instructor certificate provided. So it may have a month stamped on there or typed, on the certificate, which may actually be different from the 24 months that you actually did one of those things up there in A. Okay, so you got to make sure you look at those and make sure about that. And it also says here that the month of expiration, provided that the renewal requirements of paragraph A of this section were accomplished within the 3 calendar months preceding the expiration month of the current flight instructor certificate, and if the renewal is accomplished under paragraph A2 III, which is this one here, meaning a FERC, if the renewal is accomplished under a FERC, the approved flight instructor refresher course must be completed within the 3 calendar months preceding the expiration month of the current flight instructor certificate. And lastly, the practical test required by paragraph Alpha 1, which is up here. This is when I told you, pass one for something that you already have. That's a Alpha 1. So it says here, the practical test required by paragraph Alpha 1 of this section may be accomplished in a full flight simulator or flight training device if the test is accomplished pursuant to an approved course and conducted by a training center, certificate under Part 142 of this chapter. And here's the rub. There is not one. I think I may have said it on another video, but if I hadn't, I'll go ahead and tell you now. There is currently not in existence a CFI renewal or CFI initial course under Part 142. 14 CFR Part 142. That does not exist. So the FAA put that in there as something that actually may exist in a future time, but it doesn't exist now. Okay, cool. The next thing is, what if you have actually committed the unthinkable? I mean, you have done the incredibly unthinkable thing. You have let your CFI certificate expire. Why would you do that? Don't do that. Don't ever let this thing expire. It's so incredibly easy to keep it current. Don't let it expire. So what do you do if you let it expire? You only have one choice, Well, it's 2 choices, but mainly one choice. You gotta go fly. You have to go up with a DPE or an aviation safety inspector and actually do the reinstatement ride. Why would you do that? I don't know why you would do that. So don't let yourself fall prey of this to do that. So let's read and see what it says. The holder of an expired flight instructor certificate who has not complied with the flight instructor renewal requirements of the above reg may reinstate that flight instructor certificate and ratings by filing a completed and signed application with the FAA and satisfactorily completing one of the following reinstatement requirements. So what could you do? One is a flight instructor certification practical test, as described in 62183 Hotel for one of the ratings listed on the expired flight instructor certificate. So you do a reinstatement ride off something you already hold. Or a flight instructor certification practical test for an additional rating, which means get an additional flight instructor certificate. And then for the military pilots, they can reinstate theirs as long as they have a record showing that within the preceding 6 calendar months from the date of application for reinstatement that the person has passed those proficiency checks we talked about earlier and completed the Armed Forces instructor pilot or pilot examiner training course and received an additional aircraft. Rating qualification as military instructor pilot or pilot examiner is appropriate to the flight instructor rating sought. So if you're a military person, you can go back and read that a little bit slower, but most people, 99.9% of the people that listen to this are not military instructors. Let's look at paragraph B, flight instructor ratings. A flight instructor rating or a limited flight instructor rating on a pilot certificate is no longer valid and may not be exchanged for similar rating or flight instructor certificate. So, what do we mean by that? Well, back in the day, they used to have these flight instructor certificates, okay, that you could get, but they were called flight instructor ratings instead of certificates. And they don't have these anymore. They're completely gone away. But it says the holder of a flight instructor rating or a limited flight instructor rating on a pilot certificate may be issued a flight instructor certificate with the current ratings, but only if the person passes the required knowledge and practical tests prescribed in this subpart for the issuance of the current flight instructor certificate and rating. Okay? Letter C says certain military instructors and examiners, the holder of an expired flight instructor certificate issued prior to October 20th, 2009, may apply for reinstatement of that certificate by presenting the following. A record showing that since the date the flight instructor certificate was issued, the person passed a U.S. Armed Forces instructor pilot or pilot examiner proficiency check for an additional military rating, and they must also have a certificate by presenting a knowledge test report that shows the person passed a knowledge test on the aeronautical knowledge areas listed under 61185A, appropriate to the flight instructor rating sought, and the knowledge test was passed within the preceding 24 months prior to the month of application. So all they would need to do is certain military instructors and examiners would do that. So if you're a military instructor or military examiner, this would apply to you. And then lastly, it says expiration date, and then it says the requirements of paragraph C, and if you remember, C was this one here, will expire on August 26, 2019. So basically, we don't even care about C anymore. Why? Because C is outdated. So the requirements for paragraph C of this section will expire on August 26, 2019. Done. We don't care about that anymore. And that, my friend, is the end of the regs. There are two more things, actually one more thing that I want to show you, and that is what would you need to do on the reinstatement requirement? What do you need to do on a reinstatement or renewal ride? And let's see what we need to do. So let's open up another tab here, and let's go to the CFI and PTS, and let's see what we need to do on that. Let's open up the practical test standards here. Changes 1 through 6. So this has an additional rating task table if I want to add an instructor rating onto an instructor rating that I already have. So this is single engine flight instructor. So I'm trying to add a single engine flight instructor onto one of these, either an airplane, multi-engine, rotorcraft, helicopter, rotorcraft, glider, blah, blah, blah. All right. So if I have an airplane multi-engine flight instructor certificate, and I want to add on a single engine airplane to it, then I've got to do everything in this here column here. This column right there. I've got to do everything in that column. Okay? And what does the asterisk mean? Well, the asterisk says that refer to the note under the respective area of operation for task requirements. And that may be like, like the examiner must select one task, blah, blah, blah. And lastly is, what do you do on the renewal or reinstatement ride? And this is what you're going to do right here. Notice that there is no fundamentals of instruction. There's no area of operation 1, so you wouldn't have to worry about that. So area of operation 2 on down through there, and that's exactly what you would do on a renewal or reinstatement ride. And please remember, right here, renewal or reinstatement of 1 rating on a flight instructor certificate renews or reinstates all privileges existing on the certificate, which means that once you do this, it renews everything. You don't have to do a separate ride. What a wild journey this has been. We have completed this. There will be some additional content for this over on my Patreon account. So if you'd like to click on over there and become a patron for me, there would be great. Some additional ways that you could actually renew or reinstate that are not listed in the regulations. So if you want to advance yourself a little bit more, you can click on over there and get a little bit more advanced lesson than what you've seen here. Thanks again for being such a loyal subscriber to me. If you haven't already, this is a great time for you to click that subscribe button, click the like button, and then click on that little bell to be notified of more interesting videos that's going to come out in the future. I'm Todd Shelnut with CFI Pro Courses. Bye-bye.